26. Without further theatrics, Chesney and Lily returned to the store. He paid for the equipment for all three of them, and they swiftly left town. When he had paid, Medea gestured incredulously with her hand, but he returned with a silent gesture that they'd agreed upon long ago that meant him, "Follow my lead." She quietly accepted the matter until they were on their way, and the town far behind them on their southward journey. The distance to the ruins was about as far south as Reshutor Island had been from Ratsurt, and he traveled a lot faster these days than he had back then.
"Well, care to explain, Mr. Leader?"
she said at last, emphasizing the last words to show her displeasure at not only having her advice not followed, but also because he had essentially signaled that the discussion on the matter was closed.
"Right, yes. Everyone, stop for a moment, we need to talk,"
he said, and waited for them all to stop. Lily looked a little subdued from her earlier exuberance, but finally, being decked out in a full set of armor and weapons, he could see that deep inside she was still quite excited.
"Lily, I want us all to get formally introduced. For real."
He once again took down his hood, at which Medea gasped.
"Medea, you too, please?"
Before she could, though, Lily said,
Miss Medea, I know why you're not exactly happy that I'm tagging along. Chesney explained that you were the so-called terrorists from Nasquat, but please don't be mad at him. I have my own reasons for hating Lord. No, hating that bastard, Zagos. I begged him to let me join, and I know it's sudden, but please, allow me to join you."
The sincerity in Lily reached Medea enough that she sighed, took off her own hood, and gave Lily an apologetic smile. Reaching across to take Lily's hand, she said,
"Okay, it's good to meet you, Liliac. And just to be clear, it's not like I disliked you or anything, but what we're doing, it's going to be really dangerous. I just didn't want anyone else getting hurt. Can you understand that?"
Lily nodded, shyly, then got some of her previous energy back.
"I appreciate it, Miss Medea. Only, don't you worry about me. I wasn't kidding about being able to fight. I'm really going to show you guys what I can do. Just watch me."
Chikon pinched the bridge of his nose.
"Oh, save me. Now there's three of them."
Ignoring Chikon, Chesney briefly explained what was going on with the world, what was at stake, and what they were here to do. Some of this appeared to be news to Chikon, as he also quieted down and listened intently.
"Whoa, you two did all that,"
Lily said, her eyes shining like stars in awe. Even Chikon seemed impressed.
"Wait, you two really did Jarain? And the Helm Temple, and that story about Conshuta was true?" "Yes,"
Medea said matter-of-factly.
"Although, technically, Chesney did Conshuta all on his own. I was unavailable for that, but I was there for the Ghost Tower in Karen." "Wait, Ghost Tower?"
Lily said confusedly, before Chesney waved the matter down.
"Getting off track,"
he said, then turned to ask Lily a question.
"Alright, so, what do you know about this ruin we're going to?" Well, it's kinda well known around here. Some kind of thing or other that was built way back in the time of the Great Ones. I remember my dad saying something about Gabnid, but that's about it. As far as I know, nobody knows what it was originally for. Just that there's a big bad guy there that defends the place. Nobody in town has gone there in a very long time."
He nodded.
"Okay. Chikon, please keep most of the creatures in the area away. I want to get there without a lot of fuss." "Oh, I kinda wanted to try out all my stuff,"
she said. Lily looped and unlooped the whip she had gotten. Whether it was out of excitement or nervousness, Chesney couldn't tell.
"Oh, there will be plenty of opportunity,"
Medea said dryly.
"Trouble is always nipping at our heels."
She was correct, of course. At times along their journey, creatures still found them. Whether it was because Chikon had let his peace spell lapse, whether the creatures just were too powerful to be affected, none could say. The first time, It had been a pair of the same fire-breathing creature they had fought outside the Kiowa cave. Lily told them they were called Bronzas. They had been in the middle of a pitched battle between the pair of Bronzas and a family of very mean Elepsor-looking things. Of course, they had wound up in the middle of the whole fiasco. During that battle, Chedsney and Midia took a backseat role, stretching their legs with their new spirits, alternating using storm attacks and large arc blasts of break, while Lily and Chakan were made to take a more frontline role. Truthfully, this was their real test. Chedsney needed to know how they fought, how they took orders, and what their shortcomings were. To Chedsney's shock, that Z-eraser device of Chakan's was no joke. Large hemispherical chunks disappeared from anything he pointed it at, including the tough bronze-like skin of the Bronzas. And as for the shield he had taken from a Great One's ruin, when a Bronza had spun and viciously clubbed him with its tail, a blast of force snapped back and broke one of the vertebrae with a resounding crack. Lily took a bit longer to get her fighting feet under her, but to her credit, she was able to use the notoriously difficult-to-master whip. With experienced skill, she cracked the whip right in the snow-white Elepsor's faces, keeping them at range. Her timing could use some work, though, because eventually she lost her momentum and was getting pushed back. All at once, she was caught off guard and took 2 solid hits from their massive tree-trunk-sized legs. At that, Chedsney was about to step in, but Midia held him back and gestured to wait a bit longer. After the blows, Lily seemed to focus just that bit more. She coiled her whip around the leg of one of the Elepsors, and darted underneath the other, tangling their legs. It was then that the whip began to glow bright red, and both the Elepsors roared in pain. Shortly afterwards, the party made short work of the hopelessly tangled creatures. Once they were safe, Midia jogged over to Lily.
Here, let me heal you. I'm fine. See? Ah.
Lily gestured to herself, and there wasn't a mark on her.
Wait, what? How? I saw you take those hits.
With a pleased grin, Lily brandished her whip and shield.
Life brand weapons, brand new on the market. It's the absolute latest tech. Check it out.
The whip had a sturdy metal handle, with thin green lines of light pulsing like circuitry, and the whip itself was a series of strange metal links with rough, grating texture. The shield was in the shape of a beautifully ornate and decorated Sophie lily, like the temple of Jurain had been. At first glance it had just seemed an especially ornate design, but on closer inspection, there was a charge indicator near the handle, and metal contact points where the arm would go.
What do these do?
She asked.
Well,
Lily began, holding up the whip.
This is the life whip. Using some kinda techno-magic mumbo-jumbo. When you use it to attack something, all those little rough spots take some of the life energy from what you're attacking, and uses it to heal the user. And in the shield, that's the life brand Corsage shield. When it's at full charge, you can use it to completely heal the user. Doesn't take that long to charge up either, so you can use it pretty often. I figured with both of these, I was pretty much set for being a mercenary.
Midia was gobsmacked. Up until now, she was under the very sure assumption that healing technology was so technologically advanced. Only ancient Ragan artifacts like the bottles in Sophie's crown were capable of it. And now to find out that new weapons capable of the very same ability, or perhaps even an improvement, were just on sale at a local weapons shop. She removed her crown and traced her fingers over the very familiar circuitry, and the engraving. To my beloved, Sophie. This was something that Cormu had given to Sophie, an ancient, lost artifact that hadn't resurfaced in 10,000 years. And now, suddenly, it had been surpassed. How? Still coping with the information, she waved Chedsney over.
Chedsney, look at this.
She showed him the whip, shield, and crown.
Wait, this is all. This is Ragan technology. Chakan, can you let us see those devices of yours?
Dutifully, he handed them over. Looking them over, It was almost impossible to tell what had been an ancient artifact and what had been recently manufactured. Really, the best indicator had been that the artifacts tended to have the Reagan characters that the children didn't have any knowledge of. The eraser in Chakan's shield had it. Medea was still in awe.
I can't believe Sasquatch has access to this kind of technology. I mean, sure, Durin has the floating temple, but they have like no clue how it all works. And Sasquatch is basically just making and selling brand new artifacts like it's nothing? Well, I wouldn't say it's like nothing. All of that cost an arm and a leg. But yeah, I know what you mean. Really? Because I don't even know what I mean here. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I know we've talked about how concerning it is that Lennis has barely advanced since Sophie, Cormu, and Gabnid left, but doesn't this feel suddenly too fast? What it means is that Zagos has been very busy, and that we need to expect this kind of thing, and worse, when we go up against him. Gods. You're right. If this is what they're selling, what are they keeping to themselves?
They handed back everyone's equipment and continued on their journey. It was hard not to get even more anxious now, with everything at stake and what had just been revealed. Just how advanced was Zagos's military? Had the resistance taken that into account with this plan? And could they get the parade going before too much of a delay that the whole plan failed?
When we get back to Roki, we need to stop back at that shop. I want a set of those weapons,
Medea said.
I'm not exactly surprised, but you have no idea how to even use a whip. I will learn. In fact, I think I'll have a little practice with Lily while we walk.
And with that, she and Lily were off, leaving Chesney to walk alongside Chakan. Neither were much in the mood to talk, and so they passed the time in silence. The journey south to the Great One's ruin was a scenic one. The air was still cold, but not as bad as it had been in the Karen snowfields. The land was relatively narrow in this part of the world, and it was easy to see coast on either side as they traveled. The slope of the land was ever downward, until they reached a flat area just above sea level, and not too far distant, a large metallic structure with some of the strange green metal that had been used in the construction at the Throne of the Immortals. The structure was wide and blocky, like a warehouse or factory of some kind, and parts of it seemed to extend over or perhaps into the ocean. Unlike the other examples Great One's technology, the salty sea had definitely worn away at it over time. Parts of the greenish exterior were bulging and flaking away into an odd bluish powder. The top had several large cylindrical structures that could be tanks or reservoirs, and pipes snaked in and out of the walls everywhere.
Wow,
Lily said, drawing out the word.
This place is way weirder than I figured it would be. Oh, and what were you expecting?
Chesney asked.
Well, my pops told me all about different ruins he saw, but lots of them were just a bunch of fallen over stones. I didn't expect it to be so intact, I guess.
Medea looked to Chakan.
You've been in some ruins before. What is your take here? Well, the one I found these in,
he said, gesturing to his weapons.
Everything was still more or less working, including defenses. Don't let your guard down.
She wasn't sure she liked the idea of what kinds of defenses the Reagans would have had. She turned to Chesney.
Okay, what's the plan?
He took out his weapon and readjusted his helmet and armor.
Well, we don't even know what it is we're looking for, but chances are it's being guarded by whatever the scariest thing is in there. I'm sure if we make enough nuisances of ourselves in there, it'll find us. Be pests. Got it. Sounds like a plan to me.
Lily chimed in, smiling broadly and raising her hands excitedly. Chakan twirled his device in his hand, and nodded.
All right, let's go.
The entrance was some kind of large metal sliding door, with the control pad to the side, but long ago it had been smashed and wedged apart permanently to allow access within. True to Chakan's prediction, the facility, whatever it had been, was still operational somehow. The halls were not pitch black, but lit by flickering silo emergency light. Chesney had Lily and Chacon remain in the front. Certainly he would have been the best frontline fighter, but the halls were narrow, and he wanted to take advantage of the extra help while he could for a change. His and Midia's magic were by far the most potent. Anyway, for this, Midia stashed her staff and took out the bow she had found under the world. The main hall was empty of creatures, but filled with dirt and sand that had blown in over time. Plants had managed to grow through some of the bulging and cracked metal plating on the ground as well. Along the walls were sun-bleached signs that had long faded to nothing. The air was instantly very humid, smelling stale and somewhat mildewy. That main hall opened up into a room so large it seemed that the whole of the structure had merely been a shell for the vast room. The area here was darker, with fewer working emergency lights, but there were small rays of sunshine cutting the darkness from tiny cracks in the high walls and ceiling. Above them were walkways, long chains with great hooks for hauling, and other machinery on rails. All of it was corroded to uselessness. The main attraction of the room, though, was the absolutely massive water reservoir in the center. The water was not at all murky, but it was too dark to see into it properly. All around the water reservoir was a tall, sturdy metal fence that wasn't corroded at all.
Ooh, who's up for a swim?
Lily giggled.
Think I'll pass,
Midia added, pointing to something in the water.
I think there's things moving in there.
Lily instantly shuddered.
You changed my mind.
They took the time to circumnavigate the whole outer path around the reservoir. At one point they had found another emergency chest, which Lily ran to first before Chesney could even react. Midia chuckled quietly at his grumpy expression at not getting to open it himself, but all that was inside was a spirit card to water.
I don't get it,
Chesney said, stopping back where they had started.
There's literally nothing here. There's nothing to rummage through, or any other doors. This whole room is it. Where could this thing be? What about like in there?
Lily suggested, jerking a thumb at the water.
You think someone just chucked the thing in the water?
She shrugged.
Yunon. Could be.
He turned and stared into the dark depths, and shuddered.
There's no way I'm going in there. It's impossible to see, plus who knows what's in it.
Lily gave him a sympathetic look.
Yeah, no way I'm doing that either, boss.
Midia nibbled on her thumb contemplatively.
We might not have to.
At his raised eyebrow, she just gestured with her head for them to follow her. She led them to a part of the fence with a gap in it, and a ramp downwards. Right next to it was a filthy control panel on a pedestal.
I saw this on our little tour. Might be what we need. What do you mean? Just give me a second,
she said, absently, while blowing the dust off and wiping away the slime coating the displays and buttons.
Ugh, gross,
she whined, but still stayed focused on the keys. Gingerly, she tested one key after another while muttering under her breath.
Okay, it's gotta be this one,
she said after a time, and firmly pressing one button. A moment later, a great thunking noise shook the room, followed by some thrashing in the water. The water level slowly lowered. In celebration, she fist-pumped and did a little dance.
Yep, confirmed genius.
They watched as it lowered, revealing another path before the ramp down. They couldn't quite see the whole path, but what they could tell was the water wasn't all gone.
Huh,
Chesney remarked, pointing to the remaining water.
I wonder why it didn't drain all the way.
Midia fiddled with the control panel some more, but nothing else she did would lower it any further. She shrugged and said,
Well, let's go have a look around down there.
That was easier said than done. The ramp and revealed pathway were covered in a thin layer of slime, and it was all they could do to slowly move forward without falling on their rears. Also, a handful of creatures that had made the water their home had been left behind, and they were all perfectly capable of being nasty customers on land. Most of what they had to deal with were large blue crustaceans that seemed completely fearless and swarmed them in groups. But Lily almost had her foot bitten off by some huge blubbery thing with an exceptionally long and sharp horn to complement its mouth full of jagged teeth. Fire seemed especially useless against them, and while break was a bit better, bolt proved the most effective deterrent. Lily, unused to using her magic so much, struggled at first with the demands of battle, but occasional whip attacks seemed to perk her right up. The children were still in awe at the power of those new weapons. This time, as they found another emergency chest blinking away in the darkness, Chesney rushed over before Lily could. Medea giggled at his enthusiasm.
"You're such a kid. Find anything?"
His groan told her all she needed to know.
"Just another card. This one for Sky. This thing was remarkably dry inside, though."
Eventually, they found another control panel, next to another ramp, this one covered in red algae. A moment later, Medea had the water level lowering again, the great thunking noise and thrashing in the water returning as it did so. From their vantage point, they could actually see another control panel on a pedestal.
"Okay, I see where this is going," Medea said while wiping her hands clean. "I'm just not sure what crazy person built this place like this, though. Why have so many control panels instead of one main one?"
Chesney sighed.
"My question is, why did they put them in such a way we had to walk to most distance? Look at that one there. Because of that fence, we have to walk all the way around."
Another path around the reservoir, another chest, another set of angry marine life, and another control panel. The chest only contained some device that was broken, too, meaning whatever they were looking for was still possibly ahead. One thing that did change, though, was the overall atmosphere. The lower they got, the colder and darker it got. Very few of the emergency lights were working this far down, and the ones that were barely lit up anything. The cold, darkness, and quiet of the abandoned ruin felt almost oppressive. With a bit of nervousness to her voice, Lily said,
"Well, it looks like the next bit of the reservoir is the end, so we're bound to find it down there. I even see one of those little blinky light things. So, we're almost done and out of here."
Chesney, Medea, and even Chacon groaned exaggeratedly.
"Lily, you can't just say that out loud. That's just inviting trouble."
Chesney chided.
"It's like being a thief and saying this is your last job, or you're one day from retirement, or something." "Oh, sorry,"
she said, frowning and wringing her hands over her whip.
"It's fine. Don't get too worked up about it. Just always be ready. Always be prepared, you know? The second you think you're scot-free, bam!"
While Medea tried to clean off the panel enough to use it, Lily took Chesney aside and spoke to him quietly.
"I'm sorry I'm so new at this stuff, Chesney. Do you, have any tips on how to be a better mercenary?"
The question took Chesney by surprise. A lifetime ago, he was just setting out on his own, and all along the way people he respected and admired had taken him aside to tell him how to improve. When had he gotten to be the one people looked to for advice? He wasn't even really sure what to say to the older girl. It felt so alien giving advice to anyone, let alone someone just a bit older than his own age. All the moments of his journey zipped through his mind. How do you even condense all of that into simple advice you could put into words? But at that same moment, he remembered the most consistent advice he'd always been given.
"Well, rule number 1 of being a merc. Stay alive out there." "Well, duh, that seems pretty obvious,"
she said, exasperatedly. He laughed.
"Well, yes, but think about it a bit more deeply. Keep that thought at the forefront of your mind. You can't do anything if you're dead. So, don't take on jobs you can't do. Abandon jobs that get too dangerous. Prioritize yourself. Do you get me?"
She looked thoughtful for a moment, and nodded.
"Yeah, I get ya. You got any other rules or advice?"
He thought back.
"Well, I did get one other bit of advice. Not sure if you really want to hear it, though." "I do, though. Really."
He smirked and shrugged as he said,
"Well, if you insist. The other piece of advice I got was, always look out for the ladies."
She snuffed a laugh, and nudged his elbow.
"You idiot. Come on. Be serious." "Okay, Okay, the real number 2 is improvise. That's really all I got. If you two are done giggling over there,
Medea said, without looking away from what she was doing.
I'm ready to hit this thing.
Lily blushed and stood up straight.
Sorry.
Chesney coughed self-consciously.
Go ahead.
Medea rolled her eyes and pushed the now clean button. But rather than lower the water level, a siren shattered the silence, and all the emergency lights turned bright red. Instinctively, all 4 of them rushed together into a tight group and looked all over.
What happened?
Chesney shouted, looking everywhere into the now much more sinister-looking shadows of the red and black room. The reservoir of water turning away beside them seemed almost black, with red foam lapping at the ramp down from the lighting.
I don't know. I did exactly the same thing as before. I'm sure of it.
Nearby, the much smaller reservoir of water began to churn and bubble up. Great bulges of water would rise, and crash into each other, and fall over. A voice began to speak, strange and high-pitched. It seemed to vibrate artificially, or something like it. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
I am an elemental of water. This place is forbidden, by order of Lord Gabnid. All those who would disturb this peaceful place will be cast out. Wait. Gabnid made this plaw.
Medea began to say, but was interrupted by her own scream when something snaked around her leg and hauled her into the air, upside down. All around her, the others were similarly afflicted, dangling from their ankles over the slimy floor. It took her a moment to see what had grabbed them. Some of the dark water from the reservoir had snaked out and somehow held on to them, hauling them up from long thick tendrils. Before anyone could even think of mounting some kind of counterattack from whatever had a hold of them, they were all slammed down to the ground. Medea was able to avoid breaking anything, but the wind was knocked out of her, and the others around her weren't much better. At last, their assailant revealed themselves. Out of the bubbling, churning water left in the reservoir, a huge shape began to emerge. It was the water itself, or part of it at least. At first a large, gelatinous smooth head with a great singular eye rose from the water, and as it rose higher, a wider and wider body was revealed, with bulging portions that seemed to be approximations of muscles.
We're supposed to fight that,
Lily shouted incredulously, pointing wildly.
What in the fluff even is that thing?
Chesney coughed as he stood, trying to regain his breath and stand.
Whatever it is, it's in the way.
The great eye focused on Medea and Chacon, still on the floor, and whipped their backs with extremely fast tendrils, sending them crashing back to the floor and yelling out in pain. He pointed to the thing and shouted,
Hey! Hey! Over here! Come on, big guy! I'm not afraid of you.
Its huge eyes focused on him, and a thick, gel-like tentacle whipped through the air at him. Chesney slashed his sword in the perfect arc to cut it off, but the sword barely knocked away any of the substance within, and the tentacle enveloped him and slammed him into the wall, pinning him there.
Big mistake, buddy,
he growled, and pushed his hand into the fluid, and used fire. There was a sizzling sound, and popping, and then the thing screamed in its odd artificial and high-pitched voice. The next moment, Chesney was flung high through the air, twirling wildly.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
He hit one of the chains hanging in the air which caught his chest, stopping him and tossing him back to the ground with a crunch. While one thick tentacle had been assaulting Chesney, 2 thin tendrils were dancing between Lily and Chacon, who were protecting Medea as she got her footing. Loud cracks sounded through the air as it beat against their shields. Sensing an opening, Lily raised her arm with the whip and spun it to gain momentum before turning it and cracking it right in front of her. The sonic blast blew apart one of the tendrils, the tip of it going silent and still on the floor, and the rest of it retreating back into the monster.
Ha! How do you like that, big and ugly?
She crowed with a big grin. It answered her by slamming her with a thick blast of water that enveloped her and crushed her against the wall.
That's not very nice,
Chacon said, lining up a shot with his Z-eraser and evaporating large hemispherical chunks from the part of the creature holding her down. It dropped her, and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. 4 thin tendrils focused completely on Chacon, taking shots at both legs, his arm, and his neck. He spun through the air like a toy.
That's enough,
Medea yelled, angry electric bolts arching between her fingers. She thrust her hand forward and a great bolt shot out straight at the thing's huge eye. It exploded, and for a second, it shook and screamed. The next moment a new eye formed, and it looked right at her and flailed in rage. Its great body began to spin and whirl faster and faster, until the air was filled with such powerful wind each drop of water flung from its body felt like a razor-sharp rock as it sliced into their skin. A heartbeat later, Chesney was in front of her, shield up, panting from the mad run he had taken to rejoin the fight. The moment all of them were protected from the onslaught by their shields, it switched attacks, and watery blades as sharp as arrows shot forth, and pierced the legs of Chesney and Chacon, and Lily's shoulder. All 3 fell to the ground in pain, blood gushing from the wide holes that were left behind by the attack.
I can fight dirty, too,
Medea yelled while focusing on her spirit. The paneling around the reservoir began to buckle and tear, and the next moment she thrust both hands forwards and a great wall of dirt rose up and slammed down into the monster, splattering it all over the walls and floors behind where it had been. It started to reform, but sluggishly, as though the dirt was hindering it. After enough lessons learned about keeping their strongest medicines within arm's reach, Medea had decided to switch out her B.O.M.B. bottle for one of the other bottles of ibuprofen they'd found. She was glad for this decision in that moment, because it freed her to run to Chacon's collapsed form and easily get a pill for him. He took it, and his darkening bruises disappeared, and the wound on his leg stopped bleeding, though it didn't completely go away. The others also took the small break to heal themselves as well, with Chesney getting a pill, and Lily using the corsage shield to completely heal herself. Through deep, weary breaths, Lily called out,
"That the best you got, big guy. I can go all day." Level 1 defensive protocols are insufficient. Releasing restrictors,
the voice said in a strange monotone.
Invaders must die.
Like a battering ram, a thick tentacle shot out directly at Lily from the now almost fully reformed monster. Just in time, she got her shield up, but the force broke her arm, and she squealed in pain, cradling the arm and dropping her whip.
"Lily, get behind me,"
Chesney called, and rushed to meet her halfway. Meanwhile, Medea and Chacon renewed their attack with a bolt of lightning and another barrage of blasts from his device. The creature was undeterred, and whipped 2 more trunk-like arms of water, crashing them over Chesney, who stood in protection of Lily, as she struggled to heal herself again with her shield. Staggered, but not fallen, he reached up and blasted the creature with fire. It hardly had any effect, and the room only got warmer and somewhat steamier.
"Thanks, Chesney,"
Lily said, finally able to use her arm again, and grabbing her whip off the floor.
"I'm sorry I'm just holding us back." "You're not. Just stay on your toes, okay?"
Just then, another 2 tentacles shot out and grabbed Medea and Chacon, hauling them up into the air like it had at the beginning of the fight. This time, it slammed Medea to the ground twice before releasing her, then tossing Chacon away through the air like it had with Chesney. This time, the blow had definitely broken a few ribs, and Medea struggled in pain on the ground.
"Distract it,"
Chesney ordered to Lily, and ran to guard Medea before she could be completely taken out. Lily clanged her weapon against her shield, and called out,
"Are you even trying? Hit me already."
This time she was ready for the attack, and rolled to the side. She used the momentum to help get her whip ready, and lashed out in time to crack it in the middle of the long tentacle, exploding half of it. Chesney arrived just in time to take a solid hit intended for Medea, knocking him off his feet and crashing him into the wall beside her. He crawled through the slime and put up his shield.
"Are you okay?" Yeah, just, give me a second."
She whined through the pain, trying to move slowly enough that the cracked ribs didn't feel any worse. She managed to worm another pill out and eat it, She screamed again when her ribs snapped back into place, and rolled over to be on hands and knees, shivering.
We need a plan. Well, Bolt seems to work really good, and when you slammed it with that dirt,
Chesney said, getting back to his knees and keeping between them.
Yeah, but that dirt one takes a ton of my stamina, and whenever someone uses Bolt on it, they get targeted.
Just then, the creature stopped attacking, and built up taller and bulkier, reaching almost to the ceiling of the structure.
Current threat level at maximum.
It said in its high-pitched monotone.
Engaging final elimination protocol.
Many arms snaked out of it, and it began to spin, faster and faster. The arms reaching towards them slapped against them weakly, but kept them unstable on the slick surface. Winds picked up again, and the rain began to fall once more, cutting them like thousands of little razors. Chesney, Medea, and Lily were pushed back against the walls by the terrible force of winds, barely able to move and unable to avoid any of the onslaught.
What do we do? I can't move,
Lily called from a few paces away, plastered against the wall. Tiny little rivulets of blood were forming and being washed away from her face and arms. Medea was no better. Her weapon had fallen away, and she couldn't even lift her head away. With nothing else to do, she used the strength spell on herself, and was able to at least try to shove away from the wall. But no amount of strength would keep the slime from interfering with her ability to stand. Chesney, at least, had enough strength on his own to move a little. With everything he had, he tried to push his hand forwards enough that he could aim it at the creature. If I can just hit it once, it might give everyone a chance.
Hold on, everyone. I'm coming,
Chesney called, and he was staggering forward towards them one step at a time, shield up protecting himself, and with the other hand, holding onto the railing to stay upright. As he passed by Medea first, the pressure from the wind let up by his bulwark, and she fell to the ground. She got to her feet and crouched behind him. She shouted,
We need the others. I have an idea.
Nodding, he endured the pain of his hand being ripped apart by the rain and slowly made his way along enough that Chesney was protected, and he was rescued as well.
I don't know how much more I can take,
Chesney shouted, and by then his hand was a bloody mess, in danger of losing his grip on the rail.
Hold on, just a bit longer,
Medea shouted back, pressing her hands to his back, and filling him with as much healing energy from the crown she could. Lily's skin was no longer running red, but missing pieces. She was squealing and writhing in pain, completely pinned. With a final great effort, Chesney staggered over to protect her from the wind, and she fell in a heap. Chesney dashed back enough to haul her in his arms, and rejoined Medea as they all huddled behind Chesney.
What's the plan? We have one shot at this. All of us have to hit him with everything we can spare, all of us using Bolt. I think that should be enough to overwhelm him.
Chesney looked down to the shivering girl in his arms. Her face was a mess of red.
Can you still fight?
She nodded, and wiggled out of his grip.
Yes, just. Both of you hold me up. Whatever it is you guys are doing, do it now,
Chesney shouted, his grip finally starting to slip from the pressure and damage. All together, the three children stood up and thrust their hands forwards at the spinning maelstrom, enduring the full force of the razor-sharp winds.
Now, Bolt!
Two massively powerful, and one very strong, bolts erupted from them and slammed into the creature. It screamed in that odd vibrato, and the whirlwind faltered as it shook from the blow.
Don't let up,
Medea yelled, pushing herself as far as she could and sustaining the electric attack, and the others joined her efforts. Lily faltered first, and she fell unconscious to the ground. A few seconds later, Medea's bolt faltered, and she slipped and fell down, taking Chesney down with her. Chesney stopped his magic assault, and saw that the creature was terribly hurt. It had stopped turning, and was still shaking from the electrical attacks. Huge chunks of it were gone, but still, parts were starting to reform and crawl or flow back into it while it writhed in agony.
Let's see you reform. Ha! Ha! After this,
He snapped his fingers, and the whole room was filled with explosion. The creature was blown apart, flashing on every visible surface. All the thick gel-like blobs shuddered, and then became still and lifeless. When he was at last sure everything was safe, he fell onto his back, and took off his helmet to breathe. He turned his head and saw Medea panting right beside him. Despite everything and how awful it had all been, he smiled and gave her a weak thumbs up.
Easy peasy.
She laughed ruefully between breaths, returned the smile, and the thumbs up.
Easy peasy.
After that, the lights and everything returned to normal, and the water started draining from the reservoir, emptying it completely. They took the time to mend everyone's wounds, and passed around a small snack while they went down to the final layer of the reservoir and opened the last emergency chest that lay there. Inside was something.
What even is this thing?
Lily asked, a confused look on her face as she looked at it from many angles. What it seemed to be was a globe of some kind, with a glassy surface and a bright display of some kind under the surface. To Medea, it looked familiar, somewhat. She fished out the map device from her bag, and brought it out, comparing them.
I knew it. Look, it's the same kind of display, just less detailed, I think. Are you saying it's a globe of Lennis?
Chesney asked, turning it over in his hand. It didn't look that familiar, and nothing jumped out as recognizable. She shook her head.
No, I think that's Rega. Here, turn it this way. Doesn't it look familiar?
He tried to think back. The courtier had turned before he had set out on this journey, and during this time of year Rega was usually in shadow, so he had to really think about it. How many times had he looked up into the heavens and watched the two celestial bodies there? It seemed such a lifetime ago, another life, when he was just a carefree child wondering what Rega and Elts were like. To look up and know that beings, gods, great ones had come down from the swirling dark purple sphere, and brought them so much. The magic of youth's imagination about Rega was beyond gone for him now, but still, holding this facsimile in his hands was still awe-inspiring.
You're right. I see it now. No wonder people wanted this thing in the parade. It's honestly pretty cool. Not worth this fight, obviously, but still.
He turned it over again, looking at parts of the world he'd never seen before, with fresh new eyes, tracing his thumb over strange continents and clouds and oceans. Really, what was it like there? Was that his home? Did they belong there, and not here? Why had Cormu and his friends come here? And why hadn't more come after? These questions felt that much more real and heavy now that he knew he was somehow also Regan, and holding a glowing, moving display of the world in his very hand. Unfortunately, none of them had the time to be so contemplative right now.
Well, if this isn't it, I don't know what is,
he said at last.
Let's go.
With a minute of concentration and snap of his fingers, they were outside the ruins.
Whoa, that's so cool,
Lily exclaimed, looking around in shock.
You did that so fast. Way faster than I could.
Medea grinned.
Oh, that's nothing. Allow me,
she said, and with a flourish, she too snapped her fingers after some concentrating, and they were once again standing outside Roki. This time the sounds Lily made couldn't even be considered real words. Eventually, she settled on whispering,
You guys are so cool. Glad we have your approval,
she said, smiling.
Come on, let's get me those new weapons before we talk to the mayor.
As they walked through town to get to the weapon shop, they could see how the parade preparations were progressing. More of the performers were clothed in the flashy outfits the mayor had ordered. They were indeed very skimpy, and Chesney had to really try not to do more than glance at them in passing. The parade floats were all finished being decorated, and just resting on the ground in a row. Even some of the Shimrek had dressed up in flashy armor. That feeling of unease still filled the air, and it was obvious that the townsfolk could tell that something was seriously wrong. After purchasing the new equipment, Medea had a devilish grin on her face.
Oh, I can't wait to give this a try,
she said, spinning the whip experimentally. One quick movement later, the whip cracked in the air a little too close for comfort to Chesney's head, and he practically fell over in surprise.
Sorry.
Medea said with real concern.
I think I need a bit more practice. Geez, you gave me a heart attack,
he said breathlessly, covering the ear and trying to stave off the disorientation. After that had been settled, they made their way to the mayor's office and stomped upstairs. They found the old man on pins and needles, pacing back and forth in front of his window and looking like he'd had a few more drinks since the last time they'd seen him. As soon as they entered the upstairs, he saw them and practically jumped half his height into the air.
Oh, you're back. Please, tell me you have it.
In response, Chesney pulled the glowing globe from his bag. The mayor's eyes grew as wide as they could.
Oh, you did. You did it, my boy. You really did it. Oh, you amazing people, thank you. You've saved me.
The old man reached out to take it, but Chesney held firm.
Hold on there. We still haven't talked about what we want in exchange.
The old man deflated, just a little.
Oh, right. I did say I'd do anything, didn't I? Well, what did you want? Very simply,
Medea began, standing beside her partner.
We want in the parade. All 4 of us. Oh, that's an easy thing. An easy thing. You'll be the guests of honor. It's done. Here, give me the spirit of Rhaegar. I'll get it installed in the front float. You all go and grab some of the spare uniforms, and join in wherever you like. No, I don't think we will be wearing those,
Medea said, smiling, though with an edge to her voice.
But we will go get ready. I think they're at least kinda cute,
Lily said wanly.
Well, I mean, if you want to wear one, nobody will stop you?
Chesney offered, as casually as he could.
Oh, well, if you like them so much, maybe you should wear one too, I think,
Medea whispered harshly, staring daggers into the back of Chesney's head.
Kidding,
he said, trying to laugh it off, but nobody was particularly convinced. Not long after they left the mayor's house and found a place to stand near the assembling performers, the mayor burst out of the door himself and held the spirit of Rhaegar above his head.
Hot diggity. We got it. Everybody. We're good to go. Hurry. Get everyone together. We gotta get going. Let's move it.
At that, a cheer went up from everyone who heard, and suddenly the town was alive with activity. Scantily clad performers seemed to appear out of nowhere. Men appeared beside the floats and picked them up by the rails. A piano was hauled out and locked into a float with the pianist literally being hauled with it by 2 rather strong-looking shimra. The quartet of the party assembled, trying to stay as out of the way as possible, but before long they had been pushed forwards to near the front, and each handed colorful streamers to wave around. And with that, the mayor, right at the front and in a parade master's uniform, marched right in front of the largest float at the front with the spirit of Rhaegar sparkling in a nook made especially for it. And so, they set out. The journey to Zagos's temple was both long and short. It was a considerable distance, even longer than the journey to the ruins south of town, but the noise of the group's passage kept all creatures away, and the energy of the crowd was infectious enough that it was impossible to get bored or feel too overly anxious. Still, it was impossible to completely forget what was going on. Walking into enemy territory, knowing full well everything relied on them, and that countless battles were being waged all over Sasquatch to give them an opening. In time, Medea and Chesney found themselves walking together, with Lily and Chakan hanging back a considerable distance. Chesney held out his hand, and Medea took it, intertwining their fingers, and standing close.
How are you holding up?
She asked him. She knew this mission must be bringing up a storm of emotions in him, and also knowing he tended to bottle things up more than was healthy, was determined to keep him from being overwhelmed. He thought for a moment before replying.
Really? I don't even know. Up until now it was just Rush, rush, rush. Get here as fast as we can. And now that we're finally almost there, it's almost too fast, like I can't even really think straight about it. You're not worried about all the pressure on us? I mean, I am, but mostly I just suddenly feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. What about you?
He said, looking over to her. It wasn't lost on him that sometimes Medea liked to find ways to worry about other things when she should be worrying about herself. He knew she must be feeling this just as hard as he did, maybe even more. Her head tilted to one side, and then the other.
I'm holding up, I guess. I really get that whole feeling where suddenly it's so quick. I keep worrying that we're going to show up there, have no idea how to sneak away, and end up just walking out without doing anything.
Chetsney sighed, deeply, and his shoulders sagged.
Yahi. I keep worrying about that too. But then I keep telling myself that even if that happens, we will still have learned something. We can teleport back here anytime. We'll see the layout. We can try again. Yeah. You're right, that's true. That does make me feel a little better. Hey, wait a second. I was trying to make you feel better. Honestly, just being with you, holding your hand, talking, walking together. That really makes me feel better. It's like, if the whole world is crazy, I don't care, because all I need is right here.
At that, Medea stopped, and looked into Chetsney's eyes, feeling the blush rush to her cheek.
You know, you could just say you love me. You don't have to say things like that. But I want to do. And I do love you. More than anything.
She grabbed his robe and pulled him close, and kissed him. A few passers-by giggled or whistled, but she didn't stop until she felt dizzy and breathless.
I love you too.
She rested her head on his chest, and whispered to herself,
And I promise, I will protect you, no matter what.
They spent the rest of the walk hand in hand, each losing themselves in their own thoughts, yet feeling anchored by the other. In time, the temple appeared as they rounded a great hill. The size of the place was incomparable to anything else they'd ever seen. It was like if Geraint had been turned into a fortress, but meaner looking. The first thing that drew the eye was an incredibly high rectangular wall surrounding everything. The wall was covered in a smooth metal, making it impossible to climb. Even if anyone tried, the walls were dotted with soldiers pacing back and forth along the length. Behind those walls, other large structures loomed. Two tall, narrow, flat, smooth, and brutalist buildings flanked the whole city on either side like huge arms, and all along them were huge red banners. And hanging over all of it were 3 enormous towers at the very back, looking like 3 huge swords sticking into the ground, each connected to the other via a series of scaffolds and metal pathways. Lily and Chacon stood beside the two of them now, and they all looked over the imposing temple. All the exuberance that Lily exuded was gone now. Her eyes seemed to be sunken into her sockets, tired and dark, her mouth pulled thin, and her skin a shade paler.
Am I really ready for this?
She said to herself quietly. Chetsney was there in the next moment, about to tell her that she could leave if she wanted, but she shook her head and said,
No. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. I want this.
She gripped her whip under her cloak.
I want to take something from him for a change.
Just to be safe, Chetsney looked to Chacon.
And you?
He laughed quietly.
I knew what I was getting into. Kid. I'm in. Okay, everyone. Start up your music. Get into positions.
The mayor called from the front, and everyone started their routines. It was still a bit of a walk to the front gates, but nobody wanted to be seen as not doing their absolute best when they were this close to Zagos himself. From where they were, they could see a few patrols wandering near and far from the temple, but they seemed very thinly manned. No group had more than 4 soldiers, and most only had 2.
Looks like they did it,
Medea said softly, taking it all in.
I hope it wasn't too costly. Yeah, me too.
At that, he turned to the others and said,
Okay, everyone. Be on the lookout for any lightly guarded hallways or alleys. We absolutely need to sneak away as soon as we can,"
Chesney told them, looking very focused. As the whole parade approached the only opening in the wall, the sheer scale of the temple was manifestly intimidating, especially when they got close enough that they were cast in the shadow of the wall. Tall, fit-looking guards waved everyone inside from either side of the huge gates thrown wide. The four of them plastered on fake smiles and twirled their steamers, while keeping their features hidden by hooded cloaks and mingling amongst the less ostentatiously dressed townsfolk. Inside the temple grounds, it felt cold and sterile. There were citizens, guards, priests and priestesses, and workers watching and cheering from either side of them, not to mention the huge splashes of color from the grand banners on the towering buildings. But none of that could cover up the oppressive feeling of fear the whole city felt crushed under. Every glance revealed something strange and off-putting. Despite a full crowd, there wasn't a speck of trash. The cheering seemed regular and somewhat forced from the citizens, and very practiced. Guards were keeping as much eyes on the inhabitants of the city as they were to the parade. The feeling of being put under a microscope was inescapable. From somewhere they could not yet see, music was being played, sounding like nothing any of them had ever heard before. Craning their necks, they found that a trio of young women, using strange instruments with cables coming out of them, were singing. All three were Fiorella, wearing costumed army uniforms. The lead singer, a young woman with long black hair, though no forehead plate, and wearing sunglasses, was holding on to some kind of device that amplified her voice. The music was harsh, with a very strong beat, and the lyrics were very patriotic and antagonistic.
"Well, that's new,"
Lily whispered.
"I think under other circumstances I might have even liked it, but right now, it just feels a bit, I don't know, oppressive?"
Medea offered, not taking her eyes off the musicians and their strange instruments.
"Yeah, it feels like I'm walking into a cult meeting." "We basically are. Don't get distracted,"
Chesney said, cutting in. He shared in their misgivings about the music, which had completely drowned out the music that had been playing with the parade. Eventually, the pianist had just given up and sat there awkwardly. The four of them kept keen eyes looking in all directions, but, to their dismay, it seemed the parade ground they'd been funneled into was inescapable. Passages were either heavily guarded, or manned barricades had been set up. Everything here was simple, brutal symmetry, funneling them forward to a one last great building, faced with huge carven pillars. There was a wall keeping it divided from the parade ground, and then dozens of stairs led up to it, with the trio of musicians at the feet of those steps. And right at the very top of those steps was a large throne carved from pure white stone, upon which a figure in dark robes sat, flanked by two figures.
"Zagos,"
Chesney gasped. There had been posters and carvings they had seen of him up to this point, but they had always been distant, abstract things. Just propaganda. When Chesney finally saw him, he couldn't initially believe his eyes.
"He's a Doru,"
Medea whispered in shock.
"Yeah, he's basically the secret shame of all Doru everywhere, and why so many joined the resistance, or led other lives away from society."
Chikon growled under his breath. Beyond him being a Doru, there were even more surprising things about him. Most stunning, his skin was a shade of pale purple. Part of it reminded him of some of off-color Shimrik he had seen, or whatever race the spiritualist elders belonged to. And, like fiery, as a Doru, he had a forehead plate, though no hair. If Chesney hadn't known better, he would have suspected that Zagos was somehow just before the cusp of being labeled as a Lubot. Either that, or he had done things to his body on his own, somehow. His long ears were tall and sharp, and his eyes were sharply focused on the parade, though his posture was the image of languid ease. His robes, a luxurious pattern of green and dark purple, folded over in a ceremonial style. He must have been in his early or mid-30s. And his face was strong and youthful, his mouth, in a perpetual condescending smirk. For just a fraction of a second, it felt like Zagos had looked right at them in the crowd, and Chesney's heart skipped a beat, but his eyes did not linger. Two figures flanked him. One, a tall bulky figure that was wrapped head to toe in clothes and bandages, arms crossed and unmoving. The figure seemed somehow familiar, and eventually his clues clicked. They'd seen this person before, lingering in the back of the bar at Jerain. The other figure was a priestess of Zagos with a shiny forehead plate polished black, and with black lipstick, her arms folded into her robes and looking down at the procession with a hint of contempt.
I don't like this, Chedsney. Something is wrong,
Medea said under her breath, though she kept her face smiling and waved around her streamer. He couldn't help but agree. This didn't feel like a celebration. It felt wrong. All the right pieces were there to make it a celebration, but it all just felt like it was for show, and not in the good way.
Just keep calm. Blend in. As long as we walk out of here, we can come back anytime. Just like I said.
When they reached the end of the parade ground, they all stopped right before the wall separating them from the main building of Zagos' temple. The three great towers, like sword, cast long shadows over all. The song of the trio of young musicians ended. For a burdensomely long moment, there was silence, and the city felt truly dead. Confidently, easily, Zagos stood and smoothed his robes in a single motion.
Welcome, everyone. We stand here today to celebrate the beginning of the end of the conflicts that have plagued Lennis since time before history.
His voice was like honey, smooth and aged and warm. A cheer went up from all in attendance.
First, I wish to thank you all. Without all of your sacrifices these many years and months, we could not be here today. I know it has been hard. Life here in Sasquatch is not easy. Not easy lives like those in Nasquat who squander their resources and sneer in our faces.
A great boo went up from the crowd, full of vitriol. With a wave, silence reigned once more. His arms opened wide, addressing them all.
My people, stand proud. You, the lucky few, are here to witness our greatest triumph made real. The great labor has been finished. Neugren is complete.
Another great cheer went up from the crowd, and it did not top as Zagos continued.
Did I not tell you I would bring unity? Did I not tell you I would bring peace? Did I not tell you I would bring us back to the golden age of Lennis? What say you? Have I not done these things?
As he spoke to the crowd, his voice took on a hard edge. Over and over the crowd shouted,
Zagos! Zagos!
Seemingly with sincere emotion.
And I will do more. So much more. I will take us further than we've ever gone. All of Lennis will be under a single power, united once more. And we shall stand as equals to those who raised us up in antiquity, only to abandon us.
As the crowd's cheering grew to a fever pitch, Chedsney and Medea shared dark looks, and squeezed each other's hands. Zagos raised his hands for silence, and the crowd obeyed like thralls.
But today is not for grand speeches. Today is for celebrating your triumphs and hard work. And as such, I have a very special show in store for you all, my loyal subjects.
As he said that last bit, his gaze came down to meet with the mayor's, and lingered there for an uncomfortably long moment.
Please, everyone, allow me to introduce the guests of honor for today's celebration. I give you Chedsney and Medea, Nasquat terrorists sent by the Jerain government to assassinate me.
He gestured right to them, and a collective gasp rose up from the crowd. The blood of the four of them ran cold. They'd walked right into a trap, in the worst possible place and time to do it. Surrounded by Zagos' followers, in his seat of power, alone. They were fools to have followed the Resistance's plan, after all. Lily couldn't help but whimper in terror, shaking uncontrollably when they were singled out. She kept whispering something under her breath, wide-eyed and almost hysterical. Medea covered her mouth, and clung to Chedsney's arm, while he looked about for any possible means of escape. Chakan just stared up at Zagos, his face a mask of calm. From the wall around the parade ground emerged an army of soldiers with bows, each flanked with priestesses in robes, presumably spiritualists. With cold fury, Zagos ordered,
Everyone, back away from them. Now.
Everyone in the parade, their expressions a mix of fear, anger, and some shame, backed away to the walls, leaving the four of them exposed.
I said, everyone,
he shouted, glaring at Lily and Chacon.
Chacon,
Chesney whispered, heart gripped in terror.
Get Lily out of here, no matter what. I'll do what I can,
he said quietly, taking Lily's arm and running to the side. She followed in a daze, but the look she gave them as he dragged her off was impossible to describe.
Excellent! Good help is so hard to find, isn't it?
Zagos said, smiling cruelly.
As for the ones who brought these assassins into our midst.
He looked down coldly at the people of Roki, all of whom seemed almost as terrified as Lily had been.
I'll deal with you later. Our guests need a moment to prepare.
At his signal, the ground beneath the pair of them fell away, and they fell down into darkness. There was a strange smell to the air, and they landed on something soft. They couldn't concentrate, and all they could remember before things went dark were voices and hands pawing at them. When they awoke, the haze in their heads clearing quickly, they were in the center of the parade ground, only somehow lower. The crowd had been cleared away, and the ground they'd been on before had been a movable floor which had been retracted, leaving them now deep in a pit. All around them, watching from the walls, were the faces of the people of Sasquatch. Citizens, soldiers, all of them staring down at them. Some expressed hate, others fear, or sorrow. Some kept their faces carefully neutral. None seemed to know completely what to make of the children before them. There were cautious whispers, incredulity that these two children were truly enemies of Zagos, and more importantly, what was going to happen to them down there. All stared at them, waiting for what was to come next.
Ah, welcome back,
Zagos called from his throne.
You'll find you no longer have those stolen artifacts of Cormu, nor any medicine left in your bottles. As for the rest of your equipment, well, I do believe in a sporting chance.
The pair of them patted their bodies, finding Zagos's words true. Chesney's scabbard was empty, his armor and helmet gone. Medea had been left with all her equipment, even the crown, but Chesney was essentially completely unarmed and defenseless.
Stay behind me, Chesney,
Medea ordered, wide-eyed and near panic, standing in front of him.
No, you need to get out of here. At least one of us has to,
he said, pleading in his voice.
No, shut up. That's not happening. Just stay behind me.
She uncoiled her whip and looked all over for danger. None of the soldiers had their weapons out, though.
Now, allow us to be properly introduced,
Zagos called out.
These are the terrorists you've all heard so much about, but maybe not all of you have heard a full list of their crimes. These are the ones responsible for the massacre of dozens of families at the Helm Temple Museum and Heritage Site, just to steal Cormu's helm.
A collective gasp went up among the crowd, followed by angry murmuring.
My sister was stationed there, you bastards!
One person yelled.
How could you kill all those innocent people? That's not true. There were no families there. It was a military base,
Chesney called out, though he was drowned out by people booing.
Oh, such lies,
Zagos continued, smiling darkly and eyes full of contempt.
And so, are you saying that the slaughter of Conshudo was somehow all a misunderstanding? How many men, women, and children died that day? At your hands, Chesney. No, that's not. It wasn't like that.
He tried to shout, but his voice was suddenly weak.
They were torturing that woman. Lies. All you speak is lies. My people, this man interrupted a simple festival and slaughtered everyone in Conshudo, just to sow dissent in our glorious empire. You're the liar, Zagos,
Medea yelled. Men from the crowd started to throw things at them. Drinks, food, rotten garbage. Medea did her best to shield them both.
And everyone here knows it.
The words sounded so hollow as she tried to yell them while being pelted with trash.
Everywhere you two have appeared, disaster follows. Even our holiest researcher and high pilgrim, Joan, killed to steal Cormu's armor.
Medea grimaced, knowing she couldn't speak here. Not knowing Joan's ultimate fate, to say otherwise would only put him in great danger.
Everywhere these two have walked, death and disaster and terror and blood. When I sent the Sasquatch diplomatic corps on a mission of peace to Jerain, these two assassinated them.
They could see the crowd, or parts of it at least, turning murderous, thirsting for their blood. Chesney was paralyzed by the weights of the lives on his hands. However justified as he was when he took them, she had to say something.
You lie, Zagos. People, everything he has said is all lies and half-truth. They weren't on a mission of peace. They were inciting a rebellion. And moreover, Zagos tried to have me kidnapped from my bed before any of this. He is a liar and a tyrant, and the cause of all of the strife in Lennis. Oh really, I am the cause? No. Stupid girl. I am the solution. Chesney, tell these people what you did. Tell them how you, by your very own hands, unleashed that great Nasquat-born cataclysm upon Lennis. Tell them how you awakened Dahlgren. Tell them how you doomed this world.
At that, the crowd went silent for several heartbeats, staring at him, daring him to refute their lord's words. His hands went up defensively, and his throat closed, choking on any words he could try to levy in his own defense. Yes, of course he had done it, but Zagos had a hand in it the same as him. Hadn't he? Really, what proof did he have? What could he say beyond insinuations and guesses? Nothing that would stop this crowd from thirsting for his blood. Nothing that didn't sound like the excuses of a condemned man.
Listen, there are no words this thief and liar can use to defend himself, because the accusations are true. And hear me, my people, for I have already saved you from the calamity of Nasquat. The whole reason I have built Noigren is to counter that great mistake. It is clear that the world is in danger, and I will be its steward and protector.
More things, dangerous things, were thrown at them, and they splashed and smeared them both with filth. Medea's heart broke to see Chesney derided and ridiculed, racked with the guilt of the things that were and were not his fault.
Please,
she begged, tears welling in the corners of her eyes.
Believe us. Zagos has done these things, and worse. He didn't build Noigren for you. He built it for himself. He built it to take over all of Lennis. We're not here to destroy Sasquatch, but save it, and everyone.
Her pleas fell on deaf ears, and Zagos reveled in the humiliating position he had put them in. There was no time to consider how he had known so much about them, and what they had done, or how the plan had failed. There was only the drive to survive the next 5 minutes.
Who wants to watch these terrorists pay for their crimes?
He shouted, and a great roar joined him from the crowd.
For all that they have done, they deserve nothing but death. And death they shall have, by the very instrument they sought to destroy. Behold, Sasquatch's new protector, the great warrior birthed from Noigren to fight the calamity. Your savior.
A resounding gong-like sound reverberated through the air, silencing everything. A monstrous shape climbed over the wall separating the pair from everyone else, and leapt into the pit.
Behold my creation.
Zagos's voice grew to a mad growl, and his eyes were wide with his rage and delight.
Lokion.
Lokion was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It towered above the children by an extra 2 body length. It was humanoid in shape, with a wide fat body covered in shiny, metallic-looking green skin. In truth, it looked like a bronze statue come to life. While its overall shape looked somewhat fat, every part of it was bulging with muscles. In its 2 huge hands were a pair of curved swords half as long as it was tall. But worst of all was its face. Wide, dark, hate-filled eyes hiding behind an impassive expression. Something about how it looked at them made their skin crawl, like some utterly alien intelligence lurked behind those eyes. Eyes almost exactly like ones Chesney had seen on that fateful day in the Tower of Gabnid.
No. No, it's like hey Matt, there's another one. We're too late.
Chesney said, loud enough that only Medea could hear, his voice steeped in despair.
Lennis really is doomed.
Zagos laughed, long and hearty, growing darker and darker the longer he did so.
Yes, that's right. Everything you've done has been for nothing. But I am a good sport. Lokiarn, let them take the first shot. Let them see how useless their strength is against you. Let all see how none can stand against you.
His eyes swept over the crowd at that last comment, making sure that everyone knew that this was as much a warning to them as it was to the children. Nobody moved, and the air was silent with tension. Cheering and shouting was one thing, but still, there were two simple children there. Were they truly going to be forced to watch them be killed in front of them? And yet, many seemed eager to watch the slaughter, too.
What are you all waiting for? Come, play for us, musicians. Cheer, my people. Cheer for the destruction of our enemies.
The most bloodthirsty among them cheered and yelled their love for Zagos, and doom for his enemies, children though they may be. Slowly, confusedly, reluctantly, the rest of the crowd joined in, much as they had before, with practiced chants. The young women musicians seemed especially confused and a little appalled, but nervously began to play a different song, this one without lyrics, but with a hammering beat that seemed to match their own racing heart.
Medea,
Chesney tried to speak, but his throat was still clenched shut from his own fear and despair. He swallowed, and looked over everything, at the seemingly inescapable situation he had led them to.
I led you here. I did this. You're going to die, because of me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. Please, forgive me.
She turned and grabbed his shoulders. She couldn't completely hide the fear in her expression, but she shoved every ounce of determination she could into her eyes, hoping that some of it might reach him.
Chesney, don't give up hope. I know it seems bleak, but you've survived. No, thrived on this journey. You've never, ever, given up. Don't stop now. Please. I will protect you, with my life. I promised you. Please, don't give up.
She pointed a finger over Lokiarn's head, right at Zagos.
Our enemy is right there. Will you stand there and die while he watches? Or will you fight, Chesney?
At that, she turned, and raced towards Lokiarn, screaming her battle cry. What had it all been for? He had fought so many times, almost dying more times than he could count, seen so many amazing things, done more than he could have ever hoped. How could it all end now? Had they ever even stood a chance at all? From the very beginning, Zagos had been in control. All those times they thought they were working in the shadows, gaining strength and biding their time. He was always a step ahead, just waiting for the perfect time to crush them, and make an example out of them. It made a mockery of their whole journey. Every win, each celebration, the moments they shared together with their companions on the road, all of it was meaningless, just the antics of puppets on the ends of Zagos' strings. His heart burned with shame at every memory he had at feeling powerful, at feeling in control. It had all been worthless. All been for nothing. If he had been alone, he would fall to his knees and accept his death. Like so many times at journey's beginning, when he had felt so tired and alone, the thought of falling to the ground and sleeping and letting the ground take him was so welcoming. His body felt heavy and worn, pulling him down. Even without his armor, it felt like every single person he had ever let down was sitting on his shoulders, waiting for him to fall. His enemy was right in front of him. Finally, after all this time, he was there. He knew that the thought of his sworn enemy standing there and watching him die, sneering down and laughing as the blood left his body, should fill him with rage. But it just didn't. No. But Zagos standing there, watching Medea fight and die, protecting him, the only person left in this world who could truly understand him, trusted him, even loved him, letting her die for him was not something he could accept. Ever. The image of Zagos with his boot pressed against her face filled his mind, and his blood boiled in the blackest hate he had ever felt. She was wrong about him. He wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't do the kinds of things he had done. Heroes don't kill everyone in the way of saving the world, just to make up for the mistakes they'd made along the way. But he didn't need to be a hero to kill a monster. Monsters killed other monsters all the time.
Zagos!
He screamed, finally letting go of the rage that had been building, using all his other emotions like fuel for that purest hate. If today he was destined to die, he would make it a worthy death.
I'll fucking kill you.
Like the world had turned to slow motion. Everything was suddenly so clear to him. Lokiarn was standing perfectly still, looking on impassively as Medea struck him with her whip, with her magic, not even moving to follow her as she circled around him to try to attack him from other angles. No matter how strong the blow, or the bolt, or anything else she had tried, not a scratch, not the faintest blemish marred Lokiarn's skin. But that didn't matter right then. Zagos was his target. A part of him had thought that using huge spells like fire all or bolt all to strike would make sense, but the power would be too thinly spread out. Fire was too imprecise. Break, too easy to dodge. But if he put absolutely everything he had into a bolt spell, aimed right at him, what could he do? Chesney shot forward, feeling his life ebb away in great waves as he pushed himself into light, begging for the power he needed. Zagos was a master spiritualist, but if he was as arrogant as he seemed, there was a chance he had simply been relying on Lokiarn for protection just then. It was the only chance he had, and he had one shot at it. He thrust his hand forward, aimed right at Zagos's face, felt the power at his fingertips explode away. The slow moments of time ticked by as he waited for the bolt to instantly form between them, ending Zagos's life. But, like a statue come to life, Lokiarn moved at an unbelievable speed for something his size. Arms swinging, feet moving so fast that it was like he had multiples of each. Lokiarn swung up and knocked Medea backwards, before slapping her to the side with another blow. Then, at last, he stepped into the path of where the bolt would be, and let the bolt strike his sword, taking no damage and dissipating the force completely.
Damn you!
Chesney cried, slapping his hands together in the next moment and unleashing a terrifying blast of white flames and completely enveloping Lokiarn's body.
Get out of my way!
Out of the flames, Lokiarn emerged once more, quick as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he was right in Chesney's face, and one hand came up and punched him in the chest. The blow was devastating without armor, and beyond that the monster was obscenely strong. Chesney sailed through the air almost 10 full body lengths away, and then rolled and scraped across the ground for another 5. He gasped, having the wind knocked out of him, and instantly his whole chest filled with agony as he realized all of his ribs were broken. Daphne was right. Nothing but Cormu's sword could hope to damage a creature born of Dahlgren, or Noigren. Without Cormu's things, it was utterly hopeless. Slowly, Lokiarn stomped over to him. Every step rung through the air like a tolling bell. He was taking his sweet time. His face never changed from that awful, unnatural impassiveness it always seemed to have. But the eyes, they looked hungry. Despite everything, despite the rage, Chesney felt a fear. He tried to push himself back, anything to give him another heartbeat. At last, Lokiarn stood there, towering above him, looking down at him with dark, ravenous eyes. Eyes that wanted to kill and never, ever stopped killing. Eyes that longed to see suffering. The parade ground was quiet. At some point the cheering, the music had stopped. It felt so cold, under Lokiarn's shadow, under his gaze. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the towering monstrosity turned the sword in its hand, and held it over him, ready to end him.
Just do it already,
he choked, barely able to speak through the pain in his chest. Just as the sword started to come down, there were footsteps and a scream. The next moment, Medea was on top of him, shielding his body with her own. And a heartbeat later, a sickening crunching sound as the sword pierced her body clean through, then his, and finally impaled them both to the stone floor. Their faces were just inches apart. Her breathing turned weak and rattling. Tears fell on his face, and mixed with his own. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. It would all be over soon. They just watched the life leave each other's eyes, and let the darkness take them away. End of chapter.